Welcome back to the deep dive, the place where we really get into these complex sources and try to map things out for you. Today, we've got something pretty unique lined up. It's an incredibly structured set of materials we're diving into. Think of it less like a story and more like a theological matrix, maybe.
Yeah,
Great.
meetings.
Our job today is to connect four really core biblical structures. We're talking the Ten Commandments, the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, those warnings from Revelation, the eternal gospel part, and right back to the beginning, the fall in Genesis. What we're trying to do is show this continuous thread, this pattern of spiritual challenges that runs through all of them. Specifically, how the first four commandments really set the stage for everything else, and how failing those leads to losing specific kinds of authority.
It really is a fascinating structure they've laid out. It's not just making lists, it's comparing them, showing how the foundational law, the personal tests, and even the big end times conflict all line up. And the common thread, as you said, is this constant struggle, isn't it? It's always about resisting false authority, resisting false worship. That's the core tension.
Okay, so the source material focuses on those first four commandments then.
Exactly. Because they're about loyalty, about who or what gets your ultimate allegiance. They're like the gatekeepers. If you mess up on one of those first four, the source argues the other six commandments, how you treat people, kind of lose their foundation. And we'll track how this vulnerability plays out through what the New Testament calls the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. These three temptations are always the way creation tries to put itself in the Creator's place.
That structure is really compelling. The idea that all these major spiritual battles boil down to three kinds of temptation, and that these map right onto God's earliest commands. Well, let's dig into that. Let's start with number one, the big one about allegiance. All right, jumping right in. The source makes a big deal about how the first commandment is introduced. It doesn't just say, have no other gods. It comes right after God says who he is.
That's crucial. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. That context changes everything.
How so?
Well, the law isn't just dropped down from nowhere. It's based on salvation, on redemption. God essentially says, look, I rescued you. Therefore, the command follows.
So you shall have no other gods before me isn't just about avoiding statues or other religions.
It's deeper than that, according to this source. It's about exclusive loyalty. It's like a contract based on that act of deliverance. You can't be freed from one master just to immediately start serving another one, or worse, to just serve your own needs ahead of the one who saved you.
Okay, that makes sense. It's loyalty rooted in action, in history. And the source connects this directly to Jesus' first test in the wilderness, the bread temptation.
A direct line. The tempter says, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. It seems simple, just about food, right?
Yeah, he was hungry after fasting for 40 days. Seems practical.
But the source interprets this as a much deeper challenge.
Yeah.
It's essentially saying, sacrifice your devotion, your reliance on God, for the sake of your immediate physical survival. Put your life force, your physical existence, ahead of obedience.
So the temptation is to trade that relationship with God for a quick fix, for calories.
Exactly. The test of prioritizing the creature's needs over the Creator's word and provision. It's the ultimate trade-off, the transcendent relationship for immediate physical necessity.
I want to pause there because, honestly, it sounds almost logical. If you're starving, survival instinct kicks in. Why does the source see prioritizing that physical need as breaking the first commandment?
Because it's about the source of life. The tempter isn't just offering food, he's offering self-sufficiency. He's saying, you have the power, Son of God. Use it. Don't wait for Dad. Provide for yourself.
Okay. It's about bypassing trust.
Precisely. It challenges the fundamental nature of being a creature, which is reliance. The moment you use divine power independently of divine trust, just to satisfy your own hunger, you've essentially made your stomach, your physical need, into a god before God. You've put it first.
And Jesus' response nails that down. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God.
That's the complete shutdown. He reaffirms where true life comes from. Not the loaf, but the word. Our existence depends on staying connected to the divine source, the one who speaks. Even the Son of God refuses to act independently for self-preservation.
Right. Life comes from obedience, from that relationship, even when your body is screaming otherwise.
And the source shows this isn't just an ancient principle. It fast-forwards thousands of years to Revelation, to the message of the eternal gospel.
The angel flying through the sky, shouting to everyone.
That's the one. And what's the core message? Fear God and give him glory. And crucially, worship him who made and then it gets specific.
Specific
Who
action.
made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water?
Springs of water. That feels oddly detailed compared to heavens and earth. Why that?
The source argues that specificity is deliberate theology. It's a direct counter to nature worship, worshiping local gods of fertility or springs or rivers. By listing everything cosmic and terrestrial down to the very source of drinking water, it leaves no room for doubt.
So it's saying all of nature is created, therefore none of it is the creator.
Exactly. Worship the maker, not the made things. It's the first commandment restated for the whole world right before the final showdown. It clarifies who deserves that exclusive loyalty.
Okay, let's bring this back to the very beginning now. Eden. How does this loyalty principle show up with the forbidden fruit?
Well, remember the description. The first thing noted was that the fruit was good for food or desirable to eat. That physical appeal.
That's the lust of the flesh.
That's how the New Testament frames it.
Yeah.
And our source connects it directly. It's the immediate sensory, physical appetite that overrides the clear spoken command from God. The material labels things taken in this way as defiled things.
Defiled not because the fruit itself was bad, but because the act of taking it, prioritizing that physical desire over God's word, defiled the relationship.
You got it. It's choosing consumption over communion. You put your body's desire, your flesh, ahead of the integrity of God's instruction. And when that fundamental loyalty breaks,
Something specific is lost,
yes, the source argues that the first casualty is the ability to handle truth properly.
which leads to the consequence in this matrix. The loss of prophetic authority.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that connection? Why does confusing bread and the word or fruit and the command lead specifically to losing prophetic power?
Think about what a prophet does. Their core function is to receive and speak God's truth, right? To discern his will, to point people towards the true God. If your basic loyalty is fractured, violating Commandment 1, if you've shown you'll prioritize your own immediate physical needs, lust of the flesh, then you've fundamentally confused the source of truth and life itself. Your compass is broken.
So you can't be trusted to speak for God if you don't even trust God over your own stomach.
Essentially, yes. Your mind, your discernment, it's now guided by physical appetite instead of divine alignment. The channel for clear communication, for prophecy, gets corrupted. You can no longer reliably know or declare God's will because your own needs have become the priority filter.
Wow.
That ability to speak God's truth, that prophetic authority, is tied directly to the integrity of that first commandment relationship. Break that and the authority is gone. You've lost your spiritual north.
That's a powerful link. Putting any created thing before the creator fundamentally blinds you to the creator's perspective.
Okay, so we've lost the prophetic function due to broken loyalty. Now, the source moves us to the second commandment. This one seems to shift from who you worship to how you worship, or maybe what represents your God. Exactly. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. This is the classic prohibition against idolatry.
But it's more than just not making statues, right?
Oh, much more. It's about replacing the invisible ultimate authority with something visible, something tangible, something manageable. Humans often want a God they can see and, frankly, control to some extent.
Yeah.
Idols aren't just art. They're often tools to access power or make the divine feel less intimidating, more predictable. It's about sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Okay. And the parallel in the wilderness temptations really brings that out visually, doesn't it? This is the big one.
This is the mountaintop moment. The tempter shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. The scale just exploded from personal survival to global power.
And the offer is explicit. All this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me.
It's the temptation of jurisdiction, of immediate visible glory and power. The source defines this as bowing to other desires. Desires that promise worldly gain, and in doing so, worshiping the wrong entity, the entity offering the prize.
It's a straight-up swap. Bow to me, get the world.
And that act, that single bow, would be a catastrophic violation of the second commandment. It's acknowledging the tempter's sovereignty, his right to give those kingdoms. You'd be accepting a substitute authority, an image of power, if you will, instead of recognizing the true sovereign.
You're serving a created being or a fallen one to get control over the created world.
Precisely. It's idolatry scaled up to geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus' response again is absolute. Worship the Lord your God and serve him only.
Now, you mentioned idols aren't always statues. How does the source connect this ancient command to, say, modern systems of power? Does it see things like global economics or political structures as potential images?
That's exactly where the source takes it, especially when interpreting Revelation. It essentially argues that the beast system described there is the ultimate final form of systemic idolatry.
The beast system.
Yes, it's not just a person or a statue. It's presented as a global political and economic structure that demands total allegiance and participation. Think about the mark of the beast.
Right, you can't buy or sell without it.
Exactly. So when the second commandment forbids bowing to an image, the source sees the warning in Revelation against worshiping the beast or receiving his mark as the end times application of that same principle. It's the ultimate public declaration of allegiance to a false, created system of authority.
And the consequences described in Revelation for taking the mark or worshiping the beast are intense, eternal torment.
It underscores the gravity. This isn't just a minor infraction. It's seen as the ultimate public transfer of loyalty. Accepting that mark, participating in that system under those terms, is considered a visible confirmation that you've accepted a worldly, created authority as supreme over the Creator. It's the sin of idolatry on a global, unavoidable scale.
Okay, let's connect this back to Genesis again. The first sin was linked to desirable to eat, lust of the flesh. What was the second trigger?
The second observation about the fruit was that it was pleasing to the eye. This is the visual appeal, the allure, the glory.
The lust to the eyes.
Exactly. It's the desire sparked by seeing something attractive, powerful, glorious, like the kingdoms Jesus was shown. You see it, you want to possess it or rule it. The source labels this category of sin as abominable things detestable perhaps because they distract from true beauty and glory.
So commandment against images, temptation focused on visual glory and kingdoms, sin driven by what's pleasing to the eye. What authority is lost when someone falls for this?
This leads directly to a loss of royal authority.
Royal authority. Kingship.
Think back to Genesis 1. Humans were given dominion, right? Authority to rule over creation, essentially a royal mandate from the Creator. But that authority was conditional on faithfulness.
Okay.
When you transfer your allegiance, when you bow to the tempter for the sake of gaining worldly kingdoms or glory, lust of the eyes, you forfeit the legitimate authority given to you by the true king. You can't rule effectively for God if you're taking your orders or even just your validation from his adversary.
So the kingship is lost not by being overthrown, but by kneeling to the wrong source of power.
That's the core idea in the source. The capacity to govern the domain rightly, the royal authority, is directly linked to where your ultimate loyalty lies, often revealed by what captures your eyes, what glory you pursue. Misplace that worship, chase the wrong glory, and the legitimate right to rule is stripped away.
Wow. So failing governance isn't just bad decisions. The source traces it back to this fundamental issue of misplaced worship, sacrificing true authority for the illusion of power or glory. All right, we've covered allegiance and representation. Now we hit the third commandment. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Most people think this just means avoiding curse words using God's name.
Right, that's the common understanding. But the source material digs much deeper. It interprets taking the name in vain as treating God's character, his authority, his very being lightly or irreverently. It's about testing him, demanding proof, or even trying to usurp his position or attributes. It's spiritual arrogance.
Arrogance and testing. Okay, that clicks perfectly with the third temptation Jesus faced.
The pinnacle of the temple temptation. The tempter says, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down, even quoting scripture about angels catching him.
What's the core challenge there, according to the source?
It's multifaceted. First, it's seen as demanding proof of oneself, forcing a spectacular, unnecessary public display to prove his identity or power. It's about self-glorification through manipulating divine power.
Okay, proving himself. Wow.
Second, and very directly, it's testing God. It's putting God's faithfulness, his love, his protection on trial. Go on, jump, make God prove he'll save you. It's demanding God act according to your script.
And Jesus' response is blunt. It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test.
Absolutely. And the source emphasizes this isn't a new idea. It points back to incidents like Mesa and Meribah in the wilderness,
where the Israelites complained about water.
Yes, and their complaint was framed as testing God, asking, is the Lord among us or not? They demanded proof of his presence through provision. That was seen as a serious lack of faith, a way of taking his faithfulness in vain. The source also brings up the incident with Moses striking the rock. God told him to speak to the rock, but Moses, in anger or frustration, struck it twice.
And he wasn't allowed into the promised land because of it.
Right. The source frames that disobedience striking instead of speaking as an act of irreverence. Moses didn't represent God's name and character properly before the people. He acted out of his own frustration, essentially testing if God would still provide despite the flawed method. He failed to sanctify God's name, and the consequence was severe. Testing God is a form of taking his name, his power, his instructions in vain.
Okay, testing God, demanding proof, acting irreverently. How does this escalate in Revelation?
It escalates to outright blasphemy.
Yeah.
The beast, that final opposing figure, is described as having a mouth that spoke boastful words and blasphemies. This is the ultimate cosmic violation of the third commandment's principle.
So what exactly is blasphemy in this context? How does the source define it?
It pulls out two core definitions from Scripture, showing how this final prideful rebellion completely usurps God's identity and role.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, blasphemy is claiming to be God. Thank you. Simple, direct usurpation. This connects all the way back to the serpent's promise in Genesis. You will be like God.
Ah, the desire for ultimate self-deification.
Exactly. It's the creature trying to occupy the Creator's throne, demanding the worship and status due only to God. This is the absolute peak of the pride of life.
The second definition?
Second, blasphemy involves claiming the power to forgive sins. Other colo, who can forgive sins but God alone?
Why is that blasphemy?
Because forgiveness, in this theological framework, is tied directly to atonement and God's sovereign authority to declare reconciliation. Only the offended party, the ultimate lawgiver, can set the terms for forgiveness and declare it accomplished. When any created being, a person, a system, the beast claims that authority for themselves, they are stealing a unique, divine, priestly prerogative. They're taking God's role in vain.
Stealing a priestly role. That's interesting. So let's connect this back to Genesis 1 last time. We had desirable to eat, flesh, pleasing to the eyes. What was the third aspect of the fruit's temptation?
It was desirable for gaining wisdom, or to make one wise. Chuck. This isn't about physical need or visual glory. It's about knowing. It's the intellectual appeal.
The pride of life for me.
That's it. The desire for independent knowledge, autonomy, wisdom, apart from reliance on the Creator. It's the arrogance of believing you can achieve enlightenment or godlike status through your own efforts or insight. The source labels the outcome of yielding to this pride simply as the lie.
The lie being, I can be like God. I can know good and evil independently.
Pretty much. I can achieve wisdom and status without needing the Creator's guidance or acknowledging his supremacy. And the consequence for falling for this ultimate lie, this prideful usurpation.
Let me guess, based on the pattern. Loss of another specific authority.
You got it. The loss of priestly authority.
Okay, explain that connection. Why does pride, blasphemy, wanting to be wise like God, lead to losing priestly authority?
Because the priest's role is fundamentally about mediation, standing between a holy God and sinful humanity, offering sacrifice, facilitating reconciliation, dealing with sin.
Right.
If you commit the ultimate act of pride, blasphemy, claiming to be God, claiming the power to forgive sins yourself, you simultaneously prove you are utterly unqualified to mediate. You've positioned yourself against the one you're supposed to be mediating with.
You can't represent humanity before God if you're trying to be God.
Precisely. The source points to Adam hiding in fear after the sin. He couldn't face God. The one who grasps at divine status loses the ability to approach the truly divine. The capacity for mediation, for handling sin and facilitating relationship with God, that priestly function is destroyed by pride.
So let's recap the losses. Broken loyalty, commandment 1, lust of flesh, leads to loss of prophetic authority. Bowing to false images for glory, commandment 2, lust of eyes, leads to loss of royal authority. And irreverence, testing, and prideful usurpation, commandment 3, pride of life, leads to loss of priestly authority.
That's the matrix. The three core temptations map perfectly to the three core ways humanity fails the first three relational commandments, resulting in the loss of the three core functions given to humanity: to speak truth, prophet, to rule creation, king, and to mediate relationship with God, priest.
That's incredibly symmetrical, a devastating symmetry. Okay, we've covered the first three commandments and the corresponding losses. Now we arrive at the fourth. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This feels different. It's not about who or how to worship, but about time, structure, rest.
Exactly. The Sabbath is the capstone. It signifies completion, divine order, and rest. It's God establishing a rhythm for creation and declaring his sovereignty over time itself. Honoring the Sabbath, in this view, is acknowledging that we operate within God's established framework, his divine schedule. It's a sign that creation is meant to function under his peaceful jurisdiction.
So it's about acknowledging God's ultimate control over the whole system. But the source links the failure of rest or the impossibility of achieving true rest to something cosmic.
Yes, it makes a really interesting connection. It argues that true universal rest, Anshik, is impossible as long as the ultimate source of chaos and rebellion, Satan, the adversary, isn't dealt with decisively. The source mentions him needing to be bound in the abyss, Texai.
So cosmic peace requires the removal of the cosmic rebel.
That's the idea. It elevates the Sabbath principle beyond just a weekly observance. It becomes a precondition for universal peace and stability. If the entity who actively opposes God's law and order is still free to operate, the system inherently contains lawlessness. True, deep, lasting rest can't happen while that fundamental opposition exists. The enemy has to be completely removed for creation to finally settle into its intended divine order.
That makes the conflict in Revelation seem inevitable then, and the source connects this challenge to divine order directly to the beast and the mark.
It does. It highlights the prophecy that the beast power specifically seeks to change the set times and the laws. Changing times and laws. That sounds like a direct assault on God's established order, including the Sabbath principle. It's framed as the ultimate challenge to the fourth commandment. The mark of the beast system, by dictating its own schedule for commerce and survival, potentially overriding God's commanded times, like the Sabbath rest, becomes the symbol of allegiance to a system that rejects the Creator's authority over time and law. You're essentially choosing the beast's schedule and legal framework over God's.
So participating in that system is seen as siding with the one trying to rewrite God's calendar and rules.
That's the implication. And this leads to the necessary response, according to the source. The absolute unavoidable destruction of Babylon.
Babylon the Great. Why is its destruction so central to achieving this final rest?
Because Babylon, in Revelation symbolism, represents the culmination, the grand synthesis of all the previous failures. It embodies all three temptations.
How so?
It's the great harlot, drunk on immorality that's the lust of the flesh. It's decked out in purple and scarlet, gold and precious stones and pearls. The center of global commerce and luxury. That's the lust of the eyes, the worldly glory. And it's the city that reigns over the kings of the earth, claiming ultimate power and authority. That's the pride of life, the self-exaltation.
So Babylon is the final organized system built on rejecting the first three commandments.
Exactly. It's the world system fully committed to the three great lures, operating in direct opposition to divine order. And because it represents this total rebellion,
its judgment has to be total.
It has to be absolute for rest to be possible. The source is emphatic. Babylon must fall. Not maybe, but certainly. It will be thrown down violently like a millstone into the sea, completely removed. This isn't just punishment. It's cosmic cleanup. It's removing the structure of rebellion so that true peace, true Sabbath, can finally be established.
And the source notes that the saints, apostles, and prophets actually rejoice over this destruction.
Yes, because it represents the final victory of God's justice, the vindication of his law and order over the system that embodied lawlessness and false worship. It clears the way for the true kingdom.
Okay, but why is judgment necessary for rest? Why couldn't the rebellious system just be ignored or contained? The source goes back to Genesis again for this.
It does, right back to the tree of life. Remember, after Adam and Eve sinned, God specifically prevented them from eating from the tree of life and living forever in that state of rebellion.
He guarded the way back to the tree.
Exactly. And the principle the source draws is this. If a creature who has fundamentally violated divine law, who is operating under the influence of the flesh, the eyes, and pride, were allowed to achieve immortality without facing judgment, then creation itself would become eternally lawless.
Ah, I see. Eternal life for the unrepentant lawbreaker would mean eternal chaos.
Precisely. True rest, the very definition of shalom or anshik, requires justice and resolution. Law cannot function if transgression has no ultimate consequence, especially if the transgressor could live forever. So, separating fallen humanity from the tree of life was, in a way, an act of preserving the potential for future restoration and true rest by preventing eternal unjudged rebellion.
So the destruction of Babylon is the final cosmic equivalent of guarding the tree of life, removing the possibility of eternal lawlessness.
That's the framework. It ensures the system built on rebellion doesn't achieve permanence. It's the necessary judicial act governed by the principle of ultimate order found in the fourth commandment that clears the path for the final, true rest.
Which brings us to the end goal.
The ultimate promise that rest will be achieved, that chaos will be removed, the adversary bound, the rebellious system judged, and creation will finally enter that state of completion and peace that mirrors God's own rest on the seventh day after creation. The whole structure demands this resolution.
Wow. Okay, we've covered an immense amount of ground here, tracing this line from Sinai, through Eden, the wilderness, all the way to the final chapters of Revelation. It really is an amazing matrix, seeing how those first four commandments set the terms for, well, pretty much the entire spiritual drama. It always comes down to allegiance, doesn't it? Is it the creator? Or is it one of these three big worldly poles? Physical needs, visible power, or self-made wisdom and status?
And the precision of the mapping is what's striking.
Yeah.
The three temptations Jesus faced, the bread, the kingdoms, the temple leap, they really do correspond perfectly to those New Testament categories. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life.
Yeah.
And the consequence for yielding is consistently the loss of a specific God-given authority, prophetic, royal, or priestly. Then you see the eternal gospel in Revelation basically shouting the first commandment's loyalty test to the whole world, and the fourth commandment demanding the removal of the lawless system, Babylon, before true rest can begin. It's the same core principle, just amplified onto a cosmic end-time scale.
So that leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? Our final provocative thought for you, the listener, after this deep dive. If this framework holds, if every major spiritual failure, from Adam's choice to the beast's final stand, really traces back to breaking one of these first four foundational commands, specifically through these three avenues of temptation, what does that imply for us today? Think about it. The lure of physical comfort over faithfulness, the allure of visible power or success over integrity, the temptation of self-reliance and pride over trust in God, these haven't gone away. They're maybe just packaged differently now. So the question to mull over is, how might we in our own lives, or even within the systems we participate in, be subtly choosing the path of the flesh, the eyes, or the pride? And in doing so, are we inadvertently sacrificing our own potential for speaking truth, exercising righteous influence, or connecting authentically with the divine, losing our prophetic, royal, or priestly capacity without even realizing it, all for counterfeit promise of satisfaction or security? Something to definitely chew on. We'll leave it there for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.